So, when a military explosives facility out in Tennessee was just obliterated by a massive blast, it was way more than just a local tragedy. You see, this wasn't just some freak accident. It was a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. So let's use this event to really break down the anatomy of an industrial disaster and figure out what happens when our most critical systems fail.
Right after it happened, when a reporter asked the local sheriff, Chris Davis, to describe the building at the center of it all, he could only say this: "There's nothing to describe. It's gone." And those 5 words, they just perfectly capture the insane scale of the devastation before a single number was counted or any cause was found.
And yeah, this is what gone looks like. This aerial shot shows the smoldering crater where that building used to be. It's just a scene of total destruction that literally rattled homes for miles around and left an entire community desperate for answers.
Okay, so to really get what happened here, we're going to look at this from every angle. We'll start at ground zero with the blast itself. Then we'll get into the blame game and ask who's responsible. From there, we'll zoom out and see if this is part of some bigger, more disturbing pattern. We're also going to look at the plans that are supposed to stop these things from happening in the first place. And finally, we'll uncover the hidden costs that stick around long after the smoke clears.
All right, let's start right at the epicenter. What exactly happened at the Accurate Energetic Systems facility? Well, the hard facts paint a pretty grim picture of a huge explosion at a defense contractor working on this massive 1,300-acre campus. In all that initial chaos, one number started to cut through the noise: 19. 19 people were unaccounted for. The sheriff even called them 19 souls, which is just a stark reminder that the first and most terrible cost of this disaster was human. And the sheer force of this thing, it was staggering. There were 8 buildings in the complex, and one entire structure wasn't just damaged, it was literally erased from the face of the earth. Just like the sheriff said, it was simply gone. This wasn't a partial collapse, it was total annihilation.
But you have to ask, right? Did this just come out of nowhere? Well, if you dig into the public records, you find a pretty troubling history. Back in 2019, the company got fined $7,200 by OSHA for 3 safety violations. One of them was even labeled serious. So this was not a company with a perfect record. And that tiny fine, it brings up a huge question. Was this disaster not just a tragedy, but a preventable one?
And that question, well, it leads us right into the legal fallout. Because once the immediate crisis is over, the focus always shifts to accountability. Who's going to pay for the damage, the injuries, the loss of life? This is the question, isn't it? The one that haunts victims and their families. And the answer is never simple. That web of responsibility can stretch from the owner of the plant all the way back to the company that made one tiny little piece of equipment.
You know, when a piece of equipment fails, the law basically looks at it in 2 ways. First, was there a design defect? That means the problem was baked into the blueprint from the start, the thing was just designed to be unsafe. Or was it a manufacturing defect? That means the design was okay, but someone messed up while building it. You know, a bad weld, a cheap part. Either one of those can lead right back to the manufacturer.
So for these huge, widespread disasters, the legal tool that often gets used is a class action lawsuit. It lets hundreds of different victims, employees, their families, people nearby whose homes were damaged, all band together. They can pool their resources and file one big, powerful claim against a single defendant to try and get the compensation they need to rebuild their lives.
Okay, so this is where the story gets a whole lot bigger. Because the Tennessee explosion, as awful as it was, isn't a one-off. It's really just a single devastating point on a much larger recurring pattern of failure, one that shows these deep systemic cracks in some of our most critical industries.
Just think about it. The Beirut port explosion, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, the Texas City refinery disaster. These aren't just old headlines. They are powerful lessons, and every single one of them tells us something about what happens when complex systems fail.
And when you line these catastrophes up side by side, the same problems pop up with chilling regularity. Warnings that were ignored, a culture that valued speed over safety, and just turning a blind eye to critical weaknesses. It's like a blueprint for disaster that gets used over and over again. It tells us these aren't just freak accidents, they're the predictable results of broken systems.
So, if these patterns are so predictable, how do we break them? Well, the answer is to get ahead of it with something called business continuity management. It's not about cleaning up after a disaster. It's a whole framework for building systems that are so resilient they can actually handle the shock of the unthinkable.
At the heart of it all is this really simple but powerful idea, often standardized as ISO 22301. It's a continuous cycle. You plan your response, you do what you planned, you check to see if it's actually working, and then you act on what you learn to make the plan even better. It's never done. It's a constant process of getting smarter about risk. A huge part of that plan phase is basically like doing triage for your whole business. It's called a business impact analysis. Companies go through every single thing they do and classify it. What's absolutely critical, what's just important, and what's non-critical. And this isn't some homework assignment. It's a survival guide. It tells them exactly what to save first when everything is on fire.
Next up, they have to figure out the risks to all those critical things. For that, they use a tool like this risk matrix. It's a pretty simple but powerful concept. You just plot the likelihood of something bad happening against how bad the consequences would be. And any risks that end up in that top right red zone, well, those are the ones you absolutely have to deal with right now.
But here's the thing. Even the best-laid plans can fail. And when they do, the consequences don't just stop with the blast or the final verdict in court. So now we're going to look at the last piece of this puzzle, the invisible costs that can poison a community for decades.
The danger doesn't end when the fire is out. In a really cruel twist of irony, the very foam used to fight the blaze can become the next disaster. A lot of this foam has something called PFAS, or forever chemicals. They don't break down. They just seep into the soil, into the groundwater, and create this carcinogenic legacy that can last for generations. And the legal liability for that long-term poisoning? That stays with the owner of the property. Which, of course, brings us to our final question. We've seen the immediate human loss, the tangled legal battles, the systemic failures, and the hidden environmental damage. It all forces us to ask, when the systems we depend on for our defense, our energy, our manufacturing, when they break down, who really pays the final, irreversible price?